Hello, welcome to this week's edition of INN World's SAAT DIN. I'm Summer Nix. Anna Chapman, the woman dubbed the femme fatale of the alleged Russian spy ring busted by the FBI, is embarrassed by photos of her which have turned up in tabloids and news outlets around the world. Chapman is charged with conspiring to act as an unregistered agent of a foreign government which carries a potential penalty of 5 years in prison. She was the first of 10 spy suspects arrested a week ago in the United States to be denied bail.
It seems like a standard amateur video, but this is Anna Chapman, an alleged Russian spy. More details surrounding Anna and the 10 suspects are filtering out, but Anna's Facebook profile remains online, along with all the photographs. This one from her younger days in what seems to be the uniform for the Russian Scouts. On the job networking site LinkedIn, Anna's profile is still there as well, and it seems as though she had a British connection. A private plane company called NetJets Europe says she was employed there for a short time. It also says that she was a slave to Barclays, but they say they have no record of her working there. Not a slave in the free world, though.
America is a free country. Here is the easiest place in the world to meet successful people. In Moscow, this is practically speaking impossible.
If you really want to, you can still have a go at making friends with Anna on Facebook. But this is her cover profile, and it's still not clear what her real name was and what her real life was really like.
Plans by the Australian government to block illegal online content are angering freedom activists, but advocates say it simply brings the internet into line with other media in the country. Let's take a look at a report from Sydney on a debate that seems to be splitting Down Under in half.
The internet is an amazing place.
In fact, here at the federal government, we think it's a little too amazing. That's why we've developed Sensodyne.
With Sensodyne, the government can
a satirical video with a serious message. This TV advert, sponsored by an Australian lobby group, is trying to draw attention to the government's plan to implement a highly controversial policy, to censor the internet.
With Sensodyne, you won't be allowed to.
The government announced a plan in 2008 to put in place a filter to block websites showing things such as child pornography or instructions to commit crimes. If it goes ahead, Australia would become the first Western democracy to have such a mechanism.
It's not going to protect kids from looking at sites that they shouldn't. It's not going to stop criminals, and it's going to block access to sites that really should not be blocked. Here's an example.
Since the announcement, the clamour for the proposal to be scrapped has grown increasingly vocal. A leak of the government's secret list of thousands of sites that the mandatory filter would block showed many that were obviously involved in illegal activities. But some of the sites were from organisations that fall into an ethical grey area. One of those sites is that of Exit International, a group that advocates legalising assisted suicide. Many of Exit's members say they're angry because the proposed filter would deprive them of a valuable source of information. Opponents of the government plans say people who are determined to get around the filter will be able to, and some fear it may open the door for future governments to block political criticism. But the government and other supporters of the proposal say those fears are unfounded.
The type of material that would be subject to the internet filter is already illegal on video, magazines, TV, radio, books. You can't see it. Is that a slippery slope?
Countries such as China and Iran routinely filter what their citizens can access on the internet. Australia is unlikely to go anywhere near as far as they do, but for some, any kind of control is simply too much.
Good, clean internet censorship with Sensodyne.
British troops will hand over control of the violence-racked Sangin area of southern Afghanistan to US forces by the end of the year. The UK's Defence Secretary Liam Fox made the announcement in the House of Commons earlier this week. British forces have suffered their heaviest losses in Sangin, with almost 100 deaths in the market town and surrounding areas, nearly a third of their total casualties since the military involvement in Afghanistan began in 2001.
The deadly Sangin area of Afghanistan has claimed the lives of nearly a third of British service personnel killed in the country. But in a sign that Britain is taking more of a back seat to the Americans, the volatile district in northern Helmand province is to be handed over to US forces. Just as Britain handed over overall command of Helmand to an American general last month. President Obama has ordered a surge in troop numbers in Afghanistan. Britain's 8,000 are now greatly outnumbered by the Americans. The UK has paid a high price for its commitment in Sangin. Currently home to the Royal Marines, it's seen some of the fiercest fighting for the military since the Second World War. Of the 312 UK deaths in Afghanistan since 2009, 99 have died there. A place fought over by the Taliban, it's also a major centre of Afghanistan's opium growing industry. The prospect of soldiers being redeployed will probably please many military families, but this will be tempered by the knowledge that a high price has been paid.
David Cameron has said a judge-led inquiry will look at claims that UK security services were complicit to the torture of terror suspects. The Prime Minister promised compensation for victims if it was found foreign agents had committed abuses with UK counterparts colluding. Mr Cameron told MPs that to ignore the claims would risk operatives' reputation being tarnished.
Mr Speaker, while there is no evidence that any British officer was directly engaged in torture in the aftermath of 9/11, there are questions over the degree to which British officers were working with foreign security services who were treating detainees in ways they should not have done. About a dozen cases have been brought in court about the actions of UK personnel, including, for example, that since 9/11 they may have witnessed mistreatment such as the use of hoods and shackles. This has led to accusations that Britain may have been complicit in the mistreatment of detainees. The longer these questions remain unanswered, the bigger the stain on our reputation as a country that believes in freedom and fairness and human rights. That's why I'm determined to get to the bottom of what happened. The intelligence services also are keen publicly to establish their principles and their integrity. So we will have a single authoritative examination of all these issues. We cannot start that inquiry while criminal investigations are ongoing. And it's not feasible to start it when there are so many civil lawsuits that remain unresolved. So we want to do everything we can to help that process along. That is why we are committed to mediation with those who've brought civil claims about their detention in Guantanamo. And wherever appropriate, we will offer compensation. As soon as we've made enough progress, an independent inquiry led by a judge will be held.
The Democratic Republic of Congo's president has declared a 48-hour national mourning after a wrecked fuel truck exploded on a rural highway, killing at least 230 people earlier in the week.
People in the Democratic Republic of Congo begin a national day of mourning. 2 days ago, a petrol tanker exploded on a rural highway, killing at least 230 people. Red Cross workers are still pouring chlorine and disinfectant powder on the truck. The bodies of the dead are being buried in mass graves and the injured treated in clinics. The president declared a national 2 days of mourning on Sunday. That period begins today. The tanker exploded after tipping over and leaking petrol when it tried to pass a minibus. Hundreds of people are gathered nearby to watch the World Cup, and dozens then tried to collect the leaking petrol in jerry cans before the vehicle went up in flames. UN peacekeepers told them not to approach the vehicle, but it seems they were unaware of the danger. In the end, 61 children and 36 women were among the dead.
Desperate efforts are being made to contain the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. Surface oil slicks and sheens believed to be associated with the BP spill may cover as many as 28,950 square miles, about the same size as South Carolina. The surface sheen has stretched north towards the Mississippi Delta, west towards Port Fortune, and southeast towards Loop Current and western Florida. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration reported that southerly and southwesterly winds could push oil into the shores of Mississippi and Alabama within days.
A flotilla of oil skimmers ordered by the state of Mississippi. The clean-up effort is becoming ever more desperate. John Dane owns the skimmers.
To spend this kind of money takes time. It's over a $2 million commitment for these boats, and obviously state budgets, local budgets are all constrained. So without a commitment to get reimbursed, I think that's been one of the holdbacks.
Elsewhere, a super skim has been tried, but the weather means that they can't tell whether it's worked. The first tar balls have arrived in and around the Texas area. Captain Marcus Woodring is in charge of the Houston and Galveston region.
We found some tar balls in the surf, not on the beach. The largest one we found was about the size of a ping pong ball. We sent those off to be tested, and the results of that test came back positive as a match to the Deepwater Horizon event.
More damage to the surface. Under the water, the oil continues to pour out.
Meanwhile, Brazil remembers an oil disaster in 2000 which struck an ecosystem much like the mangrove swamps in the US. More than 1.3 million litres of oil leaked from an underwater pipeline run by Brazilian oil giant Petrobras, making it the country's largest spill. Despite the then Brazilian government claiming it would recover after a decade, the once green Mangrove Bay area is now a swampy sludge pit with no life left in the soil. The locals who relied on the water as a source of industry and income are still feeling the after effects 10 years on. Let's take a look.
On a muggy and overcast afternoon, fisherman Evo da Silva surveys the water for the spot to cast his fishing net. He has been working these waters of Guanabara Bay all his life and remembers a time where fish and crabs were plentiful here.
In the mangrove swamps by the bay, we had so much crab. I opened my bag and there they were, everywhere. I just needed to push them in. But now you don't find crab there anymore. We have fewer fish too. There are even some types of fish that don't exist anymore here in the bay.
It was something outside Mr. Da Silva's control that has killed his livelihood. In the year 2000, over 1.3 million liters of oil leaked from an underwater pipeline run by Brazilian oil company Petrobras. It happened underneath Guanabara Bay. At the time, the Brazilian government said it would take a decade for the area to recover. And today, this is what some areas around Guanabara Bay look like. What was once covered with thick green mangrove, housing crabs and fish, now just black mud, no life left in the soil, a scene of dead nothingness.
The accident was one of the most serious and severe in the environmental history of Brazil. The mangrove is one of the most fragile ecosystems in the world. Unfortunately, when industrial accidents, especially petroleum, enters the areas of the mangrove, it is a very slow process for the ecosystem to recuperate.
Petrobras has invested more than $200 million in the last decade to clean up the bay, and has dramatically improved its environmental record in recent years. But the company admits cleaning up after an oil spill is an uphill battle.
Recuperation is always a challenge. It's like a tsunami. It's difficult after a tsunami to pretend that you resisted it. You have to avoid the tsunami. But once the accident occurs, it's a very grave phenomenon. There's no doubt about it.
Knowing what is happening in the Gulf of Mexico, Mr. Da Silva says he worries about the future of the fishermen there.
I don't want to be pessimistic, but it's going to be difficult for the fishermen there. If someone does not help them, it's going to be impossible for them to support their families.
A cautionary tale from a man who has lived it.
5 years after one of England's most prolific terrorist attacks, a design has been unveiled for a permanent memorial. The 52 victims of the 7/7 London bombings will be remembered by a £1 million design. It will consist of 52 3-metre-high steel pillars, which will be regrouped into 4 sectors. Each cluster will represent a separate terrorist attack that occurred on the 7th of July, 2005.
On July 7, 2005, just a day after London had been celebrating winning the Olympic bid for 2012, 3 men in the capital set off ahead of coordinated attacks that, along with a 4th member, would kill 52 innocent people and injure hundreds. At 8:50, 3 of the bombers simultaneously detonate their devices. Shahzad Tanweer sets off his bomb between Liverpool Street and Aldgate stations on the eastbound Circle Line. He takes 7 people's lives along with his own and injures 171. On a westbound Circle Line train at Edgware Road, Mohammed Siddiq Khan explodes his backpack, killing 6 others and injuring 163. And on a packed Piccadilly Line train, Jermaine Lindsay kills 26 others and injures more than 340 as he explodes his bomb in between King's Cross and Russell Square tube stations. Almost an hour later, the fourth bomber, Hasib Hussain, detonates his bomb on a number 30 bus at Tavistock Place, killing 13 others and wounding 110. For several hours, the picture is one of confusion, with London Underground reporting at various times a power surge, a power failure, a derailment and a person trapped under a train. It is not immediately clear just how many explosions there has been, nor exactly where. The emergency services slowly begin to realise the scale of what they are dealing with as dazed survivors eventually walked out from the tunnels. Central London becomes a ghost town, with normally bustling roads deserted. With the tubes shut down, millions of Londoners find their way home by walking. In the following days, Britain reels from the information that the suicide bombers were homegrown. The British public struggles to deal with the realisation that young men who were born in England chose to attack their own country. The Arab television network Al Jazeera airs a videotape made by Sadiq Khan, the married father of one and teaching assistant from Leeds, appearing in a so-called martyr video.
Your democratically elected governments continuously perpetuate atrocities against my people all over the world, and your support of them makes you directly responsible.
A permanent memorial to the victims of the bombings, known as the 7/7 attacks, was unveiled last year in Hyde Park. It features 52 stainless steel columns representing each of the innocent dead. The pillars are inscribed with the date, time and location of each of the 4 bombing sites. Relatives marking the attacks 5 years ago with a private memorial service in Hyde Park.
Barack Obama, the US president, has said he wants direct negotiations between Israeli and Palestinians to start before the partial freeze on the construction of Israeli settlements on Palestinian land expires in September. Obama was speaking after hosting Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, at the White House for talks that focused on restarting Middle East peace negotiations and tackling Iran's nuclear enrichment program. Tuesday's meeting came as the two leaders sought to downplay recent tensions between their countries over Israel's continual construction of settlements, which is illegal under international law.
Well, I just completed an excellent one-on-one discussion with Prime Minister Netanyahu, and I want to welcome him back to the White House. The bond between the United States and Israel is unbreakable. It encompasses our national security interests, our strategic interests, but most importantly, the bond of two democracies who share a common set of values. The United States is committed to Israel's security. We are committed to that special bond. And we are going to do what's required to back that up, not just with words, but with actions.
The reports about the demise of the special U.S.-Israel relationship aren't just premature, they're just flat wrong. There's a depth and richness of this relationship that is expressed every day. Our teams talk. We don't make it public. The only thing that's public is that you can have differences on occasion in the best of families and the closest of families. The President and I discussed concrete steps that could be done now, the coming days and the coming weeks, to move the peace process further along in a very robust way. This is what we focused our conversation on. And when I say the next few weeks, that's what I mean. And the President means that too.
We discussed the issue of Gaza, and I commended Prime Minister Netanyahu on the progress that's been made in allowing more goods into Gaza. We've seen real progress on the ground. I think it's been acknowledged that it has moved more quickly and more effectively than many people anticipated.
The greatest new threat on the horizon, and the single most dominant issue for many of us, is the prospect that Iran would acquire nuclear weapons. Iran is brutally terrorizing its people, spreading terrorism far and wide. And I urge other leaders to follow the President's lead and other countries to follow the U.S. lead to adopt much tougher sanctions against Iran, primarily those directed against its energy sector.
Thank you. Anytime. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
International Olympic Committee President Jacques Rogues visited the Olympic Park and told London 2012 that they must work hard. But he was not worried about the austerity measures, including £27 million in cuts demanded by Britain's new government, saying the budget for the Olympic Delivery Authority, ODA, which is in charge of the construction of the infrastructure, is lean but sound.
With its budget slashed, the Olympics have even roped in an IOC chief to fit a chair. But Jacques Rogues thinks 2012 will be fine, despite not having as much money.
Our friends at ODA are adamant that they will be able to achieve these cuts without touching the core quality of the Games, and that's the most important aspect.
He was on a tour of the Olympic Park. About 65% of it is Games ready, which means a pleased chair of the 2012 organising committee, Lord Coe.
We wake up every morning figuring out how we can deliver a great Games in an even more efficient way. So we will continue to do what we've been doing really well for the last 5 years.
2 years to apply the finishing touches. It might be on time, but the icing on the cake is going to be value rather than finest.
Thousands of cheering revellers sprayed wine at each other as the El Chupinazo firecracker was launched in Pamplona, Spain to kick off the San Fermin 9-day annual bull running festival. Spaniards and foreign visitors alike packed the town square dressed in the festival's traditional white t-shirts and trousers, while holding up red handkerchiefs for a noisy and colourful party.
This is how they like to party in the old Spanish city of Pamplona. Thousands of cheering revellers sprayed each other with wine to kick off the 9-day bull running festival of San Fermin. This event marks the beginning of a week of uninterrupted partying. Each morning, hundreds of people, fueled by adrenaline, are chased by fighting bulls through the streets to the city bullring. Known as Los Sanfermines, the festival dates back over 400 years and now attracts thousands of tourists from around the world. Considered Spain's most famous fiesta, it was popularised by Ernest Hemingway in his acclaimed novel, The Sun Also Rises.
Queen Elizabeth II challenged the United Nations to fight global dangers by waging peace, then entered Ground Zero on Tuesday for the first time to honour the victims of the September 11 attacks. Back in New York, after more than 3 decades, the 84-year-old British monarch turned her eyes towards the future of the new World Trade Center. New skyscrapers rising over what was once smouldering debris.
For the second longest serving head of state in the world, it was a chance to reflect on 53 years of change.
I believe I was last here in 1957.
The Queen arrived at the UN headquarters in New York to address the delegates after a tour of Canada, just as she did on her first invitation to speak to the General Assembly in 1957. In her first speech, she expressed guarded optimism about the institution's ability to achieve the goals of its founding fathers. On Tuesday, there was praise for the progress that's been made, as well as warnings about the challenges of the future.
When I was first here, there were just 3 United Nations operations overseas. Now, over 120,000 men and women are deployed in 26 missions across the world. New challenges have also emerged, which have tested this organization as much as its member states. One such is the struggle against terrorism. Another challenge is climate change.
Adili Waxaw, dubbed China's tightrope prince, secured his 6th Guinness record after spending a staggering 60 days above the ground in Beijing's Bird Nest Stadium. Scary stuff.
This man's known as China's tightrope prince. He's a record-breaking tightrope walker, and his latest record attempt was quite impressive. He walked and sometimes relaxed on this thin bit of wire every day for 60 days. living in a tiny cabin on the roof of Beijing's Bird's Nest Stadium and walking on average for 5 or 6 hours a day. In fact, he covered 20 kilometres for every 5 hours of walking. No one was allowed to visit him except for his wife during the 60-day period. She was responsible for bringing him food and drink so he could concentrate. The feat now means the tightrope prince has 6 records to his name.
I'm Summer Nix, and that's the world according to INN World SAAT DIN. See you next week.